The brain has a hard time differentiating between that which is familiar and that which is true. The more someone hears something, the truer it starts to sound, to the point of where it's like, well, of course, everybody knows that.
As I was looking through your website, Hillary, one of the things that really stood out to me was that it says, train yourself, equip your kids. Learn how to raise kids who think critically, love biblically, and stand firm against the cultural tide. And we have been talking, for those who've listened to the podcast for any length of time, we have been talking a lot about biblical worldview and about the importance of worldview and how everybody has a worldview and we all get it from different places. We had Dr. George Barna on back in, I think it was November. And man, we'll put a link to that one, because if you have not listened to that episode, it's so good. And he gave some really specific steps to how to help our kids grow up with a biblical worldview. But I want to kind of walk through each of these things, because teaching our kids to think critically is absolutely so important, to love biblically and then to stand against the cultural tide. So can we kind of park for a minute on thinking critically, and what does that look like? How do we teach our kids to think critically?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like doing with kids, and I would do this back when I was a teacher, is they would make a comment and I'm like, that sounds interesting. And then you take them on what is called to the furthest logical conclusion of that. So like some of the chapters in our book, follow your heart. It's like, you'll hear that everywhere. And I'm like, is that the best idea? And then you're like, well, what if my heart's telling me to do this or this or this? And kind of come up with sometimes humorous examples of things that your heart might tell you to do that maybe aren't the best idea. I like using the example of the guy that I worked with several years back that was in his 40s and had a Tasmanian devil tattoo on the back of his calf that he followed his heart and,
and there
maybe
it was.
That's the best idea. So actually we have t-shirts that I just made. I was feeling kind of sassy one day on the Mama Bear page that has kind of a picture of her heart. It says, don't follow your heart. It says stupid things. And it has that verse next to it that's like, for out of the heart comes sexual immorality and greed and idolatry and blah, 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 blah. So it's taking things to its furthest logical conclusion, or just asking, is this true? Is that true what they've just said? Or how did they come to that conclusion? I would say, especially just when you hear kind of in some of the political stuff, people are assuming definitions to things. And there's one thing that I learned from being married is that sometimes John's and my biggest fights were because we were defining something differently. And so we would like debate until we finally discovered, oh, we're saying the same thing and we actually agree the same thing. So we could have like saved those 2 hours if we defined our words at the beginning. So I think that's probably one of the number one things that we need to have kids do is to, if someone says something that feels a little off, ask them to define, what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? There was a book that I read called, David Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he has a statement in the book that says that the brain has a hard time differentiating between that which is familiar and that which is true. And this is widely studied, that the more someone hears something, the truer it starts to sound, to the point of where it's like, well, of course, everybody knows that. I don't know how many of y'all were the whole, don't go in swimming for an hour, you're going to drown. Right. I never knew anyone who drowned, but I mean, that would be like more like an old wives' tale, but there was enough people that repeated it that people thought it was true. And so I think right now we're getting stuff like that. The idea that, gender identity and biological sex are different. That hasn't been studied. No one's like come up with some scientific study or put something in a test tube that proved, oh yeah, you're right, these two things are different. But yet, if you look in the scientific literature, it's never cited. Right. It's always stated, but it's never cited like, oh, this is the study that we got this information from. They have just accepted it carte blanche, like, yep, this is true. So I think thinking critically is kind of asking, where did the statement come from? Is this statement even true? Is there evidence that supports this statement? Do they mean what it sounds like they mean? And what would happen if everybody put this statement into action? Like, that would be the furthest logical conclusion. Would that be a good society or a bad society if everybody did this? So those are some of the principles that kind of helping your kids think through when they see and hear stuff like that.
That is applicable to, things are coming fast, like things that we're having to address with our kids that I never thought we'd have to address with our kids. And all that principle and all these principles apply no matter what comes. Like you recently did, there was an article on AI. Well, who would have thought, 5 years ago, but we can use these same principles across the board at whatever comes at us. And that's what I appreciate about it, is just teaching our kids to critically think whatever comes their way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I also love is that when we start asking those questions about God's word, it will always point us back to the truth. Like our kids don't have to be afraid to ask those same questions about the Bible, because it will always point them back to truth.
Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.